Welcome to Live a Catholic Life where faith, family, and life meet.
Welcome to Live a Catholic Life. My name is Deacon Andrew Hogan, and today I have my good friend Luke Hollwedel. I did it. I had to practice that one, people. I'll be honest with you. Luke's been a good friend of mine for a long time now, and Luke's always a great resource when it comes to the faith. So, Luke, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, we're going to talk about Luke's story. We're going to start there, like we always do. We're going to, how did Luke become a Catholic teacher, a Catholic evangelist?
Thank you. I grew up Catholic, right? Mom's Catholic, Dad's Catholic. They went to church. It was a very strict rule in our house. You get up and you go to Mass, no questions asked. If your friends sleep over on a Saturday night, they get up and they go to Mass. And they sent me to Catholic school. Like, these were good things. So I just kind of grew up only knowing Catholics for a long time. Like, the only people I knew around me now this is in Nassau County, Long Island, so everyone's Italian and Irish anyway.
Yeah.
The only people I knew who weren't Catholic were a handful of Jewish kids, right? And they were all over in Massapequa. And I think the first time I encountered people who were like Christian but not Catholic, a couple of students from a local Baptist school that had closed transferred into my Catholic school. And so, like, just anything other than Catholic as the norm wasn't on my radar until like 8th grade. Wow. So it was just kind of the status quo in the water I was swimming in. But I also kind of got that some people took it seriously and some didn't, right? Like,
right.
Everyone went to Mass, but some people paid attention, some people didn't, or some people tried to be really moral and some people didn't seem to make that effort. So, like, that was kind of in the background. I went to a very good Catholic high school, and I mean, it was good at being Catholic, and it was good at being a school. It was rigorous, It was all boys. I loved it. They worked me to death. I got good grades. I had a great time. That's really where I first started to have, like, a little bit of a prayer life of my own. They had this service that for the first few minutes of their lunch period, you could go and they had a Eucharistic prayer service. So some of the boys would go. There'd be a very brief reading, a brief prayer. They would take Jesus out of the tabernacle and you could receive communion. And I said, oh, that sounds like a good thing. I guess I should do that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't out of any pious devotion. It was that's what the good kids do. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And, it was either wait in the long line to get my lunch or go to the communion service, and you ended up eating at about the same time anyway. So I was like, oh, it's no skin off my back. But I think, like, that experience ended up working on me in ways I didn't know or see.
How old were you at that time?
That was high school. So I would have decided to start doing that at 14 or 15.
And if somebody had asked you what your faith life was, would you considered yourself a Catholic, or did you know the faith, or you were just like a card-carrying Catholic?
I would have said I'm Catholic, but so is everyone else.
Yeah.
And I would have said, but I'm a good person. I'm trying to behave and follow the rules.
There you go.
And I've grown up to a point where I would say that's not really quite the criterion the way I think of it anymore, but it's not a bad place to start either. Right. When I was between junior and senior year, maybe junior year, the bishop of my home diocese, it's a Diocese of Rockville Center, right, Long Island. So they were reining in Eucharistic prayer services and saying, no, you should really only be receiving in the context of Mass, barring extraordinary circumstances. So they switched it to an adoration service. So you'd walk in, you'd have a few minutes of silent adoration, you'd say the divine praises, right, and you'd get benediction. And that's where I got exposed to, like, adoration for the first time as like a 5-minute daily habit. And again, that turned out to work on me, because now, for the first time, I was actually praying silently.
Yeah.
Right? Up until that point, prayer is always something you do with your mouth moving.
Right.
And now, it's like, oh, we just kind of sit here and look at Jesus. This is a little odd and uncomfy, but I guess we do it. That definitely came to work on me later.
How was your home life? Did your family pray before meals? Was Was the faith alive in your home also?
Kind of. From the perspective of natural virtue, very much mom and dad strict, right? You respect authority, you follow the
Right.
rules, you do your work, you're honest, you don't lie, you wake up early and you work hard, right? It was a lot of you're going to be a good man. Um, but there wasn't like a really deep prayer life at home.
Right.
I think a lot of that was being good, but not necessarily being distinctly Catholic. Not opposed, but everything they really drilled in that I remember at least was things that like Catholics and other Christians and other faiths might really have in common.
Right.
But it was virtue. That wasn't the word my parents were using, but
Yeah, they were building it.
and oh boy did they build it. They were tough, and I look back and I'm glad they were.
Yeah. Well, it's called formation, right? Even at home, your
Yes.
parents are forming you, whether it's forming in the faith or they're forming you as a young man.
Dad worked very hard. He got up very early in the morning. He went to work. He came home late. He worked his tail off. Mom insisted on honesty. If you ever were saying something to or about her or your brothers, and she caught even a whiff of you not telling the truth, oh, you were gonna get it. I learned to be really honest from mom. I learned to work really hard from dad, and we always ate dinner together as a family. Every
That's
single
beautiful.
night, everyone sits around the table. There's no distractions. I mean, this was before phones were an issue, but there's
Yeah.
no distractions, and everyone talks about your day, has dinner, has conversation. It wasn't till I went to college that I found out that's not a given.
Right. How many siblings do you have?
3 brothers.
3 brothers. Wow.
Yeah, five men in the house and one very strong mom.
How do you where do you fit in the line?
I'm number
brother?
3.
You're number 3. All
I'm
right.
number 3. Yep.
Right.
I went to college and it all changed.
Yeah.
I went to college and I had to figure out for myself whether or not I'm going to do this Catholic thing, which values that my parents and my school tried to instill I was going to stick with, which ones weren't important to me. There were definitely parts of the faith I was not living. Looking back, I would say objectively, I was probably in a state of grave sin for most of high school and early college, but I didn't have that language and didn't know that
Yeah.
and hadn't
You
framed
went
it
in
that
and
way.
identified that. Yeah.
Correct. So it
Yeah.
wasn't on my conscience, but it was wreaking havoc in my life, right?
Right.
And so, like, you mostly did the parts of the faith that were important for having a reputation as being a good person, but that doesn't necessarily spill over everywhere. And at the same time, when I showed up to college, I was gripped with like really big, deep, philosophical, even existential questions about what life is for and what it's all about. All the stuff college freshmen think are the deep questions, right?
Right.
And my questions really focused on suffering. What's suffering? What's it for? Is it good? Is it bad? Everyone else seems to think it's bad, but I had this weird hunch that I couldn't shake and I couldn't prove that somehow suffering is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
And I would only later learn like that's a distinctly Catholic kind of insight and take
Right.
on things.
What was your major?
I went in declared psychology, but just because I was supposed to check something on the form.
Right.
Really, I started studying economics right away, and I thought I would do economics and finance. A lot of the guys from my high school end up going into like financial work and Wall Street and such, so I thought I was going to go there.
Yep.
But as I studied more, a little bit of psych and more economics, I realized the parts I found totally uninteresting were the economy, right? Where like interest rates and the macroeconomic stuff. And the
Right.
stuff I found really interesting was microeconomics. It was the study of human behavior and when they are and aren't rational decision makers. So
You're back to psychology
to philosophy.
and psychology, right?
Yeah.
Don't they? Those two things married make psychology makes philosophy bloom.
What I figured out is that psychology, in the sort of very modern, very secular sense of the thing, turns out to not be very helpful compared to spiritual theology, traditional Catholic psychology, which is sort of almost a different discipline than modern, even though they'll agree on some points.
Right.
And it makes sense if you think psychology, it's etymology, right? Psyche and logia, right? It's the study of the soul. If psychology is the study of the soul, then it doesn't make a ton of sense to talk about the soul without talking about God.
Right.
And therefore, in a psychology that insists on being a science that doesn't regard the supernatural and keeps all that at arm's length can't be correct.
Right.
It can be partially correct some of the time, but a psychologist who is agnostic about God or even atheistic is sort of like a podiatrist who doesn't believe in gravity.
Right. Right. Yep.
Your foot's drawn to the ground, and try studying it without acknowledging that fact, and your soul is drawn inevitably towards God. And how are you going to talk about it without realizing it at some point?
Yeah. How do you justify or rationalize psychology unless you have philosophy? You know, to make it all come, you know, together, more or less.
I think a lot of what psychology as its own discipline started filling in the 18 and 1900s, when it really sort of blossoms into its own field proper,
Yep.
is the hole left by philosophy when it abandoned its love of truth and went, you know, nothing but analytical and secular.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So at one point, did you change your major?
I switched to philosophy when I realized
Yeah.
all of the questions I wanted answered were being answered in philosophy, not in economics.
Right.
So academically, I'm switching from economics to philosophy. I'm trying to get deeper and deeper into what the human person is. Personally, I'm wrestling with questions about suffering and what it's all for.
Right.
And with all that going on, one or two professors reached out to me. One professor in particular, she knew all the guys I was friends with because they were all studying classics as well as philosophy, and she was the Greek professor. The other professor, by the way, was the Latin professor, who was her husband. So this is Mr.
Wow.
Professor Begley and Mrs. Professor Begley, as we called
Interesting
them.
couple. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So she reached out to me at some point and said, "I noticed you didn't sign up for my Greek class." Now, I hadn't met this woman yet, or if I had, it was in passing, and she said, "But the whole New Testament was written in Greek, and if you're serious about understanding the depth of the scriptural basis of our faith, I think you should consider taking Greek." Well, I'd never had a professor who I'd never met before sort of cold call me out and invite/challenge me to take her class. So I signed right up. I said,
Yeah.
that's an invitation and a challenge. I'll
Yeah.
take that. So I'm switching to philosophy and starting to study classical languages. I started Greek. They said, "Oh, you know what makes Greek easier? If you study Latin with it." So I started taking Latin.
Yeah.
And then, like that semester, all the things I was thinking, all the things I was wrestling with, all the bad habits I was trying to avoid thinking about and pretending that they weren't part of the suffering questions,
Right.
they all just formed into one thing and exploded. And I got immersed in the Western tradition. And I mean art and architecture and Latin and Greek and poetry and philosophy and opera and the traditional Latin Mass.
Wow.
And all of those things, just sort of one after the other, just kept smacking me and hitting me in the face. And it was so beautiful and so rich. And I never recovered. Like I've been in that
what was
headspace
your
since,
what was
like,
your
age 20.
what was your prayer life at that point in your spiritual life? Were you starting to go to daily mass, or were you praying at a regular time every day and having a real routine?
That's when that came alive.
Yeah.
Among those other pillars of sort of the whole Western tradition that I discovered the breviary.
Right.
I discovered the rosary. Like, I'd learned to pray the rosary as a kid and in Catholic schools, but like it had always been something you rattle off that takes 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yep.
Not something that you enter into as a meditation.
Right.
Oh yeah. I started praying Liturgy of the Hours. I started reading books, especially from sort of the Eastern Catholic tradition and the Eastern Orthodox tradition, about asceticism and about contemplative prayer.
Yeah.
I started picking my classes around when daily mass was, so that I could get to morning prayer with the priests before first period or first class.
Right.
It was always Greek and Latin at 8:30 in the morning, and then be back to daily mass before lunch, before whatever class was in the afternoon. Like I ended up spending most of the second half of college living something like a monastic life, as much as you can as an undergraduate.
Right.
I started going barefoot.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
It
Yeah.
was at first because I came into a real devotional life through philosophy. I was reading Plato and Socrates was making a really sort of personal impression on me, and the Stoics. And so at first, oh, being barefoot is a mark of leisure. This is what the philosophers do. Socrates always did. Um, and then someone tried to tell me, Luke, this is Vermont. You can't possibly do that year round. And, well, once someone told me I couldn't.
Tried to do them.
Oh, I had to, and I did. And I walked in
Yeah.
class barefoot, and I walked through the snow, and
Wow.
it was terrible. But I was learning the answer to that question I had come gripped by about suffering being good. I learned about asceticism and how suffering can be a good. And I learned about mortification of the flesh as a way to cultivate the interior life. So yeah, I spent the second half of college not like partying and socializing. I spent it like fasting and keeping vigil in the chapel overnight.
Wow. What year were you in college at this point?
Sophomore year is when I made the transition. I started Greek. I started exiting economics. I got
Right.
deep into the ancient philosophers. Junior year, fall of junior year is really when it started to explode altogether, and I was in the chapel, 3 hours a day, and yeah, it was that mid turning point.
So at some point, did you start discerning priesthood or religious orders?
Yes. So I had a
Yeah.
friend who had come into college knowing he wanted to be a priest, and we hit it off right away. We were two of the only guys who were very serious about our Catholic faith in a school that is nominally a Catholic school.
Right.
So we were buds kind of from the beginning. And he immediately introduced me to Vision Vocation magazine and sort of these resources for looking at orders and dioceses for priesthood. Oddly enough, I never really considered the diocesan priesthood. I thought about it for about 5 minutes and said, yeah, that's not for me. But I was really, really confident for about a year there that I was going to enter religious life, and specifically monastic life.
Wow.
And I went on a few discernment retreats. I went and did a discernment retreat with the Carmelites, another one with a group of Benedictines. It turns out that's not where I was called, right? Spoiler alert, I'm married.
Right.
But that's what I felt attracted to. No, it turns out I wasn't being called to religious life. I was called to be a faithfully practicing Catholic in the world, but I didn't have a ton of examples of people who had a routine life of mental prayer and self-mortification who weren't religious, right? That's how the priest
Right.
live. That's how the monk lives. And, well, your lay people Catholics, they're either nominally going through the motions or maybe working really hard to be good people, but, like, no one had showed me how to synthesize those. Really, it was those two professors who did. Like, those became my models of,
Wow.
this is what a really pious, devout, virtuous layperson who's integrated a serious intellect and a serious prayer life into like a career and a family. Like,
Right.
they became my model for that.
Using the gifts that you were given by God to lift up the world that you're going to be a part of, right?
Yeah.
You know. So you graduate college, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a degree in
Philosophy.
philosophy at
Yeah,
this
and a
point.
classics minor.
In the classics minor. What's your first job?
Teaching.
Teaching.
Yes.
Right.
So a little background. A part of the story I skipped. When I was in high school, I did a program called PrEP, Parish Religious Education Program. I did it because it was one of the things the good kids do. It was prestigious. It was the sort of thing you got to put on your resume.
Right.
And what they did is they recruited, the religious brothers that ran my high school recruited a handful of students to be catechists at the local parishes. Now, the way religious ed typically runs in that diocese, if you're a public school student who's Catholic and preparing for the sacraments and such, 1 day a week after school, you go into the Catholic schools and get your catechesis there. Here, we normally do it, right, attached to the church and on Sundays. But there, it was more like an after-school program.
I like that.
Well, it worked quite well because now you've got high schoolers going in and teaching the religious ed classes for the 5th and 6th grade kids.
Right.
5th and 6th grade is a tough age. Not everyone who's a catechist wants to deal with middle schoolers. But when a 15, 16, 17-year-old boy who's wearing jacket and tie walks into that room, those kids sit up straight. It hits different.
Right.
So I was a catechist for 3 years there. You know, one of the older boys taught me, and then I taught a guy after me.
Wow.
So I had that catechetical experience. When I was in college, and I started really coming to the faith in a deep interior way. I got some people together to do a Bible study. I got some other people together to say we should like read the Catechism as a group and just see what it says. It's quite dense, and college students don't plan well, so we didn't get very far. But
Right. Now we got Father Mike Schmitz for that.
this was long before we had anyone doing it for us.
I know.
So I kind of had been doing some level of evangelization and catechesis, throughout, and I had kept up a relationship with my old high school. That was my summer job, and every time I was home, if I was home for like 2 weeks in Christmas, I would call the school and say, "Hey, can I come in and do some maintenance work for you guys? And can I get 40 hours of work while I'm in town?"
That's cool.
I needed the money.
Yeah.
So I went right back to my high school to teach. Now, they did not need me to teach theology because they've got religious brothers, but they did need a Latin teacher. And I had my classics minor. I could certainly handle Latin 1 or 2. My Latin was never quite good enough that I should be the guy running it at the top of the program. So I said, well, can we do a half and half? What I want to do is study theology. I had been kind of disappointed at my college that there was no theology, but there was religious studies. And the religious studies tended to be, at best, critical of the of Catholic faith.
It's so sad.
It was a very secular kind of, we're going to study this as a science, and we're going to critique and treat all the truth claims equally and such. And
Right.
it was a very skeptical, not particularly Catholic program and department. And I had started reading theologians and found them fascinating and wanted to read them. Now here I am at my Catholic college, and the way to get a good education in the faith is to study classics and philosophy. But unfortunately, it was frequently to avoid the religious studies department.
Wow.
So I wanted so badly to study theology. Well, I went and taught scripture and Latin at my old high school and enrolled in a lay master's program at the seminary in my home diocese. And so for the next 4 years, I taught Latin and theology at the school. I studied theology for my master's. And that seminary had just opened a intentional community for lay young adults. So, guys, men and women in their 20s and 30s who were working out in the world but wanted to live in an intentional community. We got to live together there at the seminary and pray there.
Wow. Everything came full circle at that point, right?
Oh, yeah. So all those things that I had been thrown into and were exploding and blossoming for me in that junior and senior year, I got to go out into the world and live them. And I showed up at this intentional community, and suddenly I'm the guy who knows the faith really well. Now, I think I'm the one here to learn it because I'm at seminary, and they're looking at me like, you've read way more of these books than we have. What, talk to us.
That's cool.
That was a really cool place to be. I was very glad we got to do that. Yeah.
So where does your journey take you after that? Somehow you ended up in Western Mass.
Yes. So junior and senior year in college, as I'm thinking about religious life, and the deeper into senior year I get, we're not doing religious life. I start dating now my wife, Mary Jo. Right out of college, we get engaged. She moves down to Long Island to join me down there. I work for a year. We get married. As I'm working at Chaminade, the high school, and getting my master's, Mary Jo very much really wanted us to come back here where she's from, right? She's from Springfield. Her family's been here forever.
Yeah.
And that sort of was the understanding is when I wrap up the master's, it's going to make a lot of sense for us to head up there. It's less stressful, more affordable.
Right.
As much as I grew up surrounded by family on Long Island, everyone had kind of scattered when they went to college and not come home.
Right.
My family at the time had people living, all over the United States, and not just in the United States. And I mean, we had cousins who I'd seen all the time growing up, living in Alaska, Austria, and Addis Ababa. We're kind of like the far-flung corners of who was where.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they never all came home.
Yeah.
And settled back on Long Island. And Mary Jo's family, they're all still here in Springfield. Not all, but almost.
Yeah.
And now our generation are really coming home. We bought a house in the neighborhood. And one of her cousins is back and bought a house in the neighborhood. So we came back to be here, where her family is, where there's deep roots. It was very unsettling to me to be somewhere that wasn't Long Island or college. Like that was
Yeah.
It was a big culture shock.
It is. It's got to be. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Worlds away from Western Mass, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. One anecdote. We'll put a point on it. When I moved in and started teaching at Pope Francis, that was the job I got right upon arrival. I was warned, driving from the Forest Park neighborhood up to Chicopee, up 91, that there was road work and that therefore there would be traffic. So I'm thinking, okay, Springfield to Chicopee, not in the most convenient part of either. It's probably 20 minutes. But they said traffic. So I need to budget at least an hour. But it's my first day and I don't want to be late. So I should probably budget an hour and a half because, well, in New York, that's what it was, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
a 20-minute drive with traffic meant at least an hour.
Yeah.
So I had just assumed I had to triple the drive. I get on the interstate. 2 lanes are closed. It takes 3 minutes to get past the blockage. And I go through and I was like, wait, where's the traffic?
Yeah.
There weren't even a million people.
No, it's a totally different dynamic. Yeah.
Wildly different. And then
Yeah.
like things close at like 8 and 9 o'clock. And
Yeah.
I wasn't sure that stores closed ever. Like they don't right outside New York City.
No.
Yeah, there were a lot of nuts and bolts that kind of,
Right.
it was a bumpy first year.
So you were at Pope when it first opened then, right?
I was at Pope the second year that it was running as Pope
Okay.
Francis
All right.
School. So they merged. Their first year post-merger, I was still on Long Island.
Right.
Their second year in the Chicopee building, I was there. And I'm very glad because I heard that first year was quite rough. I can't imagine taking 2 schools with different cultures and merging them and it being anything but
No.
rough. So no matter what went wrong that year, everyone would say, well, it's still better than last year.
Wow.
And as the new guy, I was like, what the heck was last year? Because this is a mess and you guys are all happy about it, you know?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Holyoke, so a lot of my friends and my family went to Holyoke Catholic, and none of them were happy with the Holyoke Catholic going away.
I heard a lot about it my first 2 years, and by my third and fourth year at Pope, it seemed like that was finally kind of receding, and everyone
Yeah.
was thinking less in terms of which tribe and camp they were from, and more in terms of this is what we're doing going forward. You know,
Yeah.
I got to be there with some of those inaugural grades. The first one to have been only in the merged high school, and the first one to have only been in the new building. And, you know, I got to be there for that transition,
Right.
and in a lot of ways to help build it. So that was really cool.
How long were you at Pope?
I taught there for 4 years.
4 years.
I did not teach Latin. I got to teach just theology. It's the only time I've been at a school where I was only teaching like one subject and only
Yep.
2 courses to prep. It was really leisurely. And at the same time, it was the first time I was teaching and not also getting a master's degree at night. So it was a breath of fresh air. I was
You
like,
had
wow,
all
I'm a specialist now. I've already got my degree and I'm focused
Extra
on one
time on your
thing.
hand.
Yes.
Now, so you enjoyed that. How did you find the class? How were they receptive to the theology you were teaching?
It was mixed.
Yeah.
Some of the students came in utterly unchurched, uncatechized, and some of them came in really knowing the faith impressively well. And I used to keep track of which schools they had come from. You know, I remember, the St. Stan's kids will know like their catechism and their books of the Bible a little bit ahead of some of the other schools, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, some of the kids were open to the faith. I had very few who came in enthusiastic about the faith, but I had kids who came in very open to it and kids who came in very closed to it.
Okay.
And so sort of on that intellectual axis versus on that you know where the heart is kind of
Right.
axis, right? I had people in all 4 quadrants on that spread.
And that probably reflects their home life and the faith at home more than anything, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can get catechized very thoroughly at school, and the parents cannot support that catechesis with real evangelization and formation at home. And what you get is a kid who can rattle off the nuts and bolts of the faith while hating it.
Right.
And those will end up being your kids who really complain about the faith being shoved down my throat and sort of get a pushy new atheist edginess to them about it.
Yeah. If you're in a Catholic school, though, I just don't. That's a disconnect I will never understand.
Yes.
You know. So
yeah.
4 years there, and from there you go to St. Mary's.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my third year at Pope, COVID happened. Spring 2020, everything
Right.
gets shut down. The world gets turned on its head. And then my fourth year there, I was the dean of students at the time. And so I kind of was in charge of enforcing COVID policy over and above normal disciplinary policy.
Yeah.
And that was a rough year. It was masking, social distancing, one-way traffic in the hallways, no water fountains. It was all that stuff. I was in charge of enforcing it. At the beginning of the school year, I was very enthusiastic. This is what we need to do, open the school, and I will do whatever it takes to open the school because we need to be open. We can't be remote. That was spiritually crushing for a lot of people.
Right.
And the longer that year went on, the more conflicted I felt. And therefore, the more burnt out I got because more and more I was learning, everyone was learning more about what COVID actually was and that some of the stuff we were doing probably wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
But here I am enforcing it, letter of the law, like that,
Yeah.
that kind of burnt me out. And then the year was just way more stressful because of all those extra things. And I really got burnt out, overextended, frustrated, just on the operations end of helping run the school. That took a lot out of me.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was starting to have doubts about how serious the school was about its Catholic identity and Catholic mission. I was starting to see the cracks where, okay, I don't think this lives up to a Catholic school, at least not up to the model of my previous school. Now, maybe that's unfair. That school had been around forever. The school is new. That school had religious brothers running it. The school was all lay people, right? It's not an
Right.
apples to apples comparison, but I was finding those gaps challenging. And so on a natural level being burnt out and frustrated,
Right.
on a spiritual level saying, I think there needs to be more here, and not finding myself in position to really move that forward.
And also
Yeah.
just looking at the wider world, right? The wider church and saying, listen, we need to do something here that's positive in the way of faith. We need to move these kids closer to God and to promote the faith and the faith community. Yeah, at the same time, which is, I mean, it's everybody's goal. Not even just the teachers, it's the parents, it's the clergy, it's the lay faithful.
Yeah. Yeah. So around that time, I switched. I jumped over to St. Mary's.
Yep.
They were in the middle of an interesting attempt at renewal. As long as I'd been in Western Mass, and apparently for like a decade before, enrollment had been dripping down and down and down and down.
Yeah.
They got to the point, probably around the time I came to Western Mass, that they had, I think, 68 kids for a high school in a building that was made to house between 150 and 200, right? And so they had got to this point where the school looked like, at least from the outside, it needed to be closed. No, I've since learned, because I worked there, some of the inside baseball about who was pushing for what, and I don't want to air any of that laundry here, but
Right.
you can't continue to run that high school financially as an institution at 68 kids. It just isn't going to work. So there was an attempt to close it. There was an attempt to save it. There was an attempt to renew it. And Dr. Dan Belargian, superintendent of the schools at the time, Dan is very, very focused on the mission, focused on evangelization oriented.
I know
And
Dan
in
and
fact,
his family.
perhaps exclusively, right? And yeah,
Right.
this is a guy with a big Catholic family who prays the rosary daily with his family and then goes to work at Catholic schools, right? Like this is a guy who's all in on mission. And he says, we can save St. Mary's High School. And sort of writes up this plan for what it would take to save it. Now he's honest. He knows your enrollment problems didn't come out of nowhere. You need to change parts of your identity as a school if you're going to grow. You can't keep doing the same thing you were doing and suddenly turn around the enrollment trend.
Right.
So one, they're going to switch from a parish school to a diocesan school. Two, they're going to overhaul their scheduling system so that part-time enrollment is possible. Not just part-time teachers, but students can enroll on a part-time basis so they can bring in homeschooling families. He's trying to build a bridge between Catholic school
Right.
world and homeschoolers. And three, they're going to switch to a classical program. And the classical thing and the homeschool thing really go together. Like that's a big sort of mutual
Yeah.
attraction.
They're very well together.
Yes.
Yes.
And at the same time, he's making sure to infuse it with a new vitality of Catholic identity and faith. Well, I hear all this at the time when I'm frustrated, in my role at Pope, and I meet the principal, and he says, you should come join us.
Yep.
And I dove in. I gave it a shot. I came in as the academic dean. Part of their goal was to switch to a great books classical curriculum. I think they looked around at their team and said, we don't have anyone who knows great books classical curriculum. And here I am with a classics and philosophy background. And
Right.
the books they want to teach are what I've been reading in the evenings for leisure anyway. Like, let's give this a try. I came in very enthusiastic and tried to build a lot of things. I was allowed to build some things, and they went well. But there were deeper changes that would have needed to happen. And I wasn't allowed to touch those and wasn't allowed to make some of the changes that would really need to be there. So on the one hand, they're saying, we want to be a classical school. On the other hand, they're saying, but we also want to make sure every kid stays on a laptop every period, and we're never going to get rid of the one-to-one device program. Those two things are really in tension with each other, right?
Yeah.
There were lots of little frustrations like that kind of built up pretty quickly.
Right. I mean, from what I've listened to a lot of the programs about schools and on Catholic radio about it converting to classical education, and I'm by no means an expert in any of it, but the one thing I heard over and over again, it's all or nothing.
Yes.
You can't just stick your toe in the water and say, oh, we're going to do this part classical, but this part we're not going to do. It's got to be all or nothing.
Correct. It's not something you can do half-heartedly or partway. I think anyone whose background is in public school education or in like just normal education, even if it's in Catholic schools but it looks a lot like public schools, just doesn't get the gravity of what they're talking about. They're used to thinking, well, you have 7 different subjects, and they're all totally isolated from each other and divided.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if you change your science curriculum.
Different
that won't affect
teachers
your
and
history
everything.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
In classical world, integration is the name of the game.
Right.
You are integrating across subjects because we start by recognizing that there is one truth and all the subjects are different ways to approach it.
With the
like
faith being the
pedagogies.
core, the faith is the core of that, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Strictly speaking, it needn't be. You could imagine maybe a secular classical education.
Right.
And that's an interesting thought experiment. But it's telling that most people aren't doing that. It's Christian classical education. It's Catholic classical education.
Right.
That's really having this great renaissance and renewal.
Oh, the results are incredible. I listen to the Midwest schools that are converted over to classical education, and they're touting their graduation rate and the success, their kids going to college and, developing into this fine young men and women,
Yeah. Yeah. Classical, I think, confuses people or intimidates people because they're not sure what to think. They hear classical and think, oh, like classical music, like Mozart or something.
Yeah.
They hear classical and maybe think classics, like
The great books type of things. That's
great
what
books,
they think.
good,
Yeah.
not bad, but they
Yeah.
also, I don't know, they might even be thinking classic rock for all I know. Like I'm not sure how clearly they've got that term defined
Yeah.
or have their head around it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, people hear it as a signal for conservative. And I'm not sure why they do, but I've definitely talked with people who, when you say classical, they think that means, crypto right wing. It doesn't. It needn't. But I don't, and I'm not sure where that part of the reputation, where that slander started. But like that's not what it's about. But so it's hard to shake that when no one's clear on it.
Well, I think hardcore Catholic. I think the fundamentals of the faith are upheld. Everything about the faith is taught, and everything around the education is based on the faith.
Yes. And once you take into account that the faith puts a very high value on tradition and rooting everything in what we've done for the last 2,000 years and what we've done that works for the last 2,000 years, suddenly it feels traditionalist, even though it's not necessarily tied to any one,
Right.
practice of the liturgy or anything like that. But suddenly people start to see a rhyme or hear an echo there, and they get very uncomfortable.
Right.
I've seen a lot of people shut down on classical without understanding it. They catch a whiff of something they don't like, and they close it out.
Well, it might be because it has the sense of what we used to do. It was the core of the education system in the Catholic Church at one point. So they feel like they're going back to something, and we haven't evolved or whatever. But you look at the results of our evolving in our school systems; it's not good. You have some Catholic schools that, I'm not saying this about St. Mary's, and I'm not saying this about Pope, but there are Catholic schools that don't profess the faith, sadly.
And I would say even worse and more spiritually toxic and destructive, there are ones who profess the faith with their lips, but not with their policy and practice. And that
Exactly.
turns out to be worse, because then people think they got, the real thing. And what they got was a tiny watered down version of it.
Right.
The other place we do that model, where you take something powerful and potent and you water it down to a tiny little weakened version of itself and give it to someone, well, that's a vaccine. Right? That's what a vaccine is. A virus that's so powerful it could kill you. We water it down so much it can barely hurt you, so you inoculate against, so your body feels it has defeated this thing. I think that's why a lot of people who went to Catholic school think they know the faith, and I'm talking about people who hate the faith and are away from the church. Oh, I went to Catholic school. I know what the church says. I know what the Catholicism thing is I rejected. You hear that a lot. I hear that especially the generation older than me, right?
Yeah.
They didn't get the faith. They got an inoculation against the faith by
Right.
getting a mediocre Catholic education. I would much rather send students to a school that is openly godless, any state school, than to a school that is wishy-washy and watering down the faith while saying they're giving you the real thing. Because then
Right.
there's at least not the danger of that illusion. They know they haven't encountered the mystery yet,
Right.
rather than thinking, oh, I've owned that mystery. It's not that strong.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. That makes all the sense in the world, and I see it in my older siblings who went to Catholic schools who want to sit me down and tell me what the church really is, and they tell you things that I'm like, I'm sorry, the church has never taught that, but don't believe me. Do your own research. Nobody should take my word for anything. If it's that important, your faith, your relationship with God, dive in, go deep, go to the early church, study, and you'll end up Catholic.
It's not like the books aren't out there. It's not
I
like the
know.
websites and the blog posts and the videos explaining the stuff aren't out there. Like, there are a glut of resources, more than any one person could read, of people explaining what the faith actually
Right.
is, as well as of primary sources. No one person's ever going to get to read all the fathers, all the councils. Like, that's already more than, maybe you could speed read the whole thing, but that's just scratching the surface of the tradition.
Right.
There's no excuse of, well, I couldn't learn it. There's an excuse of, I didn't want to, or I've already decided I know enough.
Right.
And that's a dangerous temptation.
Yeah, instead of doing the mind YouTube thing and watching these crazy shorts or whatever you're doing, or whatever's on TV or on Disney or Apple TV, give yourself an hour or two.
Yeah.
With Ascension Press or Word on Fire, and you name it. We have the greatest resources in the history of the faith right now.
Yeah,
Take advantage.
There's not a supply problem.
No.
There might be a demand problem.
Yeah.
And classical education's well suited to tap into that kind of tradition. My favorite definition for classical education, this one is specifically to deprogram someone who thinks they know what it is and has rejected it, but they've misunderstood it as. Classical education is what everyone called education until the 1900s.
Right.
100% of education in the West, even before the church. Classical ed has its roots pre-Christ, right? Just like the other parts of the faith do.
Right.
It goes all the way back to the ancient Greek gymnasium. What the liberal arts are didn't change with the church, and the church didn't invent them. They go back to Aristotle. They've got that deep of a root, and of course they're baptized by the church and they're transformed by grace.
Right.
But what an ancient Greek person before Christ, what someone living in the Roman Empire at the time of Christ, what a medieval person coming up even in the Dark Ages as well as into the Renaissance, what the founding fathers of this country received is all classical education.
Right.
The only people, at least in the American side of things, who are not getting classical ed are people who instead have been formed by the educational philosophy of John Dewey, and only for the last 100-ish years.
Right.
We're a tiny little experiment, and I don't think it's going particularly well.
No, the world is lapping us.
Yeah.
And we spend, 10 times, 20 times more on education than any other country in the world.
With lower results.
Yeah.
And the domestic counterpoint there, right? You can prove it by comparing across countries, but you can also prove it looking within your own community. Homeschool families often will score better across standardized tests than public school families or even private school families.
Well, yeah, and
depending on the private school.
And they'll graduate at 15, 16 years old because they've done all the work already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only that, you know what? I got to tell you this story. I met a bunch of homeschoolers, and there was one, I think the kid was like 12 years old. He had a conversation with me like an adult. I'm like, who are your parents? And turns out he's homeschooled and, Jay's son. And I'm like, your son's amazing. He's like, well, we teach him at home.
One of the coolest parts of my time at St. Mary's was getting to know the homeschool families. Yeah, those kids are different. They've got a much wider spread of personality, of hobbies, and of interests, and almost to a man, they're the ones who are comfortable walking up to an adult, shaking their hands, making eye contact, and having a conversation.
Yeah.
That's rare from public school kids. That's less rare, but rare from our Catholic school educated kids who come out of our Catholic K-8 world, and
Right.
is given for homeschool families. That they can comport themselves with adults as well as with children.
Yeah, it's amazing to witness that, to see these kids and talk to them, and it's just like, well, they're not missing anything. They're not lacking any. People say, well, they're not going to have social skills if they grow up they get taught at home. I'm like, I'm sorry, they have more social skills.
And if social skills is what I see in some of the students coming out of the public schools, well, then social skills might not be the most desirable thing. If what I'm seeing matches what that
Well,
term
it depends
means,
what
then
your term of social skill is, I guess.
yes.
So you've left St. Mary's.
Yes.
Let's tell us where you are now and what your role is there and how you see your mission now.
I'm at St. Michael's School in Brattleboro, Vermont. I still live here in Springfield. I commute every day. It's a bit of a trip. It's worth the trip. St. Michael's School is a classical K-12, well, pre-K to 12 school, and it's a parochial school. There's not a ton of those left where within the context of your parish, you can get pre-K all the way up to 12th grade.
Yeah.
They do it there in one facility. It's very small. Having a high school there is relatively new. They've had a pre-K to 8 for a very long time. The high school just got added in the last decade. And the high school came in and they decided this is going to be a classical school. And the classical educational philosophy has been trickling its way down into the elementary school since they've put the high school in. So it did that transition gradually from the top down, which is interesting. That's not a common method.
Right.
I'm thinking of St. Michael's in kind of an interesting way these days. When I came to this diocese, I was told there are 2 Catholic high schools. There's Pope and there is St. Mary's. And St. Mary's might not be around for long. At least that was the word on the street when I arrived.
Right.
However, both of those are very clearly in the south of this diocese, right? Like Westfield and Springfield are, excuse me, are not accessible to large parts of the diocese.
Right.
A substantial number of the students at St. Michael's are from the Diocese of Springfield. If you're a family that lives in Greenfield or anywhere north of there and you want a Catholic education for your kids, St. Michael's is often the closest option for you.
Wow.
And because it's in Brattleboro, right, southeast corner of Vermont, it's in a tri-state area. About a third of their kids are from Massachusetts, and therefore from Diocese of Springfield. So I was very sad and in a lot of pain when I realized I had to leave St. Mary's, partly because I had made really great connections there and I had fantastic students there, but also because I felt like I was leaving the diocese that's my home diocese now, and I want to be faithfully laying down my life for the church in Springfield.
Right.
And then I learned about how much more, oh, no, this school is serving substantially, a small number, but a substantial number of Springfield families. I'm like, oh, no, I'm still on mission. I'm still serving
Right.
the families and the schools of my diocese in a real way. That's encouraging to me.
Yeah, and it's good to be almost a bridge too between two dioceses. Also, I mean, we're so close to Enfield, and a lot of times we don't know what happens just 20 miles over the line. It would be nice to be, one community, one Catholic community. And I know we have different dioceses, but the lay faithful, attending different types of programs and things like that, we should be, using their resources, and they should be using ours, just like our men's and women's conference.
Yes.
It has a wide reach. We want to reach other communities.
Those strict diocesan lines,
Yeah.
like strict lines of parochial territories, are very valuable for legal proceedings and for clerical matters.
Right.
But lay people cross those lines all the time, the same way we cross state lines to go to work sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
the community is way more organic than that. It shouldn't have a wall at that diocesan boundary.
No, and we need to build that. When I grew up in Holyoke, what happened in the Irish Church stayed in the Irish Church. The French Church, I had no clue what went on there. The Polish Church, there again, it was like a separate world. We can't have that anymore. We need to really break down those lines, get together as one community and kind of lift each other up, build each other up. Send our kids to school together and educate each other, or educate our children together. We need to do more of that. The church has been way too segmented.
Yes. Yeah, people in their silos is almost never helpful.
Yeah.
Outside of like monastic life, we have that. It's called a cloister. If
Yeah.
you're not called to be
Yeah.
a cloistered contemplative,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be siloed.
No. It's good that you found a place that, appreciates you, where you're happy, where you're content. I mean, that must be an hour.
Yeah,
Drive,
it's a
right?
little less than an hour on the way
Yeah.
up, a little more on the way back, just because
Yeah.
the traffic swing.
And then construction's always
That's
always
fun.
a challenge, especially through Northampton these days.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I had longer drives on Long Island, going only 20 miles, but
Yeah.
longer just because you're sitting,
Yeah.
with a million people between you and the exit.
And it feels better if you're moving.
Yes, much
Even
less,
if you're going the same distance. I
it's
mean,
less
same time.
stressful
Yeah.
cruising a long distance than it is
Yeah.
white knuckling it and just trying to inch in, and everyone's honking and fighting each other
Yeah.
for every inch of pavement, right?
So what is your role? What is your job description up there?
So I'm teaching several classes. I've got Latin, theology, math, literature, and some more theology. I've got 5 courses. And
Wow.
I've got them spread across the middle school and the high school.
That sounds like quite the workload.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Catholic schools, especially the small ones, it's normal for people to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
In classical schools, over and above that, you're trying to train generalists, not specialists. And you want your people to be generalists, not specialists.
Right.
We were just talking about not having people siloed. You don't want to have a science department siloed from your math department.
Right.
Everyone should be comfortable in maybe not every subject, but most subjects.
Right.
We deliberately vary who teaches what. You can tell a school's not going to do classical well if the teacher thinks, well, I've always taught this course, so I get to keep teaching this course. This is my course.
Right.
Rather than, oh, we should all be dabbling in each other's fields, right?
Right.
In addition to my teaching load, I'm the vice principal for the upper school. So grades 7 to 12, I'm the VP. Mostly that means we've got a substantial number of new teachers this year. I am training them. I am mentoring them. I am giving them a lot of support on
Right.
how to become a Catholic school teacher. So I have been providing formation and professional development and giving talks to the faculty and such.
That's fantastic.
It also means I'm running sort of the school culture end of the upper school.
Right.
My colleague, Peter, I'm very glad he's the one doing it. He's in charge of all the curriculum stuff, and that man's way smarter than I am and has read a ton more. So he's the right guy to be doing the book lists and figuring out all the nuts and bolts of how the curriculum comes together.
Right.
Disciplinary matters, school culture things like what we do and don't wear to school and what music we do and don't play at the dance. I'm kind of the last stop for that.
And how would you describe the culture, the overall culture of the school? Is it joyful? Is it faithful? Is it
Yes, incredibly.
wow?
All the things I wanted to be building at St. Mary's and was often prevented from building is what this school has been building in its high school for the last 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
The easiest way to see the difference would be to show up at Mass. When you show up at Mass at St. Michael's, the student body Mass that we go to every week,
Right.
students walk in silently. They know where to sit. They're reverent throughout the liturgy. They know that when you arrive at Mass, you kneel down and prepare yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
Then they participate in the Mass. They know whether or not they should be receiving communion. And after Mass ends, everyone takes a few minutes, and they make their thanksgiving, and they make their way out. It's orderly. It's peaceful. We've got a couple students who sing a mix of hymnody and Gregorian chant.
Wow.
And that's what we do every week.
So, what clergy are involved with the school?
The pastor of the parish, because we're a
Right.
parochial school, right?
Yep. Okay.
The school is one of the properties and ministries of the parish, same
Yep.
as the soup kitchen that's in the next building over.
Right. Is he by himself, or does he have a vicar with him?
It's just him.
Wow.
Yes.
How about a deacon?
I don't think so. Haven't seen one. So
No.
yeah, which is impressive. Imagine
Yeah.
one guy running all of that.
Yeah, that is a large that's a large amount of work.
Yeah.
That's a wide community to keep gathered together.
Yes.
But
He's,
if
he's,
you
he's a good
got,
priest.
yeah,
We're very blessed to have him.
he's got the Holy Spirit in him, and maybe that's one of his charisms. He's maybe meant to be involved in the school and to gather the flock that way, the young kids. That's great.
He comes in and hears confessions every week.
That's really
Every single week. Our school chapel. So we're right across the street from the parish church, but we
Right.
still have a school chapel with the tabernacle populated there. Right. That's an
that.
important part of the school.
yeah.
Everyone, no matter what, students, and I mean all the way down to the kindergartners, up to the faculty, when they walk by the chapel, they stop and they make the sign of the cross, or if their hands are full, they bow.
Right.
Father's in there 1 day a week hearing confessions, and the whole school knows the routine on the day that Father's in. If you want to have a meeting with the priest, we don't ask if you're receiving the sacrament of confession or not, for,
Right.
for obvious reasons related to the seal. We just say, does anyone want to meet with Father? Names go down to the office, and kids just in the middle of class throughout the day. Everyone goes, has their appointment. He's there as long as he needs to be.
Wow.
I was struck by the large number of students who take the time to go and meet with Father when he's in.
That's great.
It's not just the ones who are sort of overtly pious. Some of my students, it's like, okay, you're from a very Catholic family. I know your
Right.
family. I can see your scapular under your school shirt. Cool. I'm glad you're here. That's fantastic. And yeah, those kids go to meet with Father and, go to adoration and such, right?
Yep.
But I've also got kids who I think they're not actually Catholic, but they still want to go down and talk to Father. Or they're Catholic, but they're not really practicing, or I've never seen them take communion, but they still want to go down and work something out with Father. Like the real deep personal engagement with the faith is alive there.
Those are seeds being planted right there. Yeah.
Yes.
And how about the parents? So overall, you say the parents are. Would you say they're all into the helping and being part of this wider community?
Some of them.
Yeah.
I've got some parents who are all in.
Yeah.
I've got some parents who have been in that parish forever. I've got some parents who are not Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually got a couple parents who are pastors at a Protestant church nearby.
Yep.
We're just the Christian education they can get,
Wow.
in town. And I've got parents who are completely away from the faith and not practicing and have no intention of it. What I don't have are parents who are opposed to the culture of the school. The parents who are in for the faith, the parents who are there, maybe even in spite of the faith, they all understand this is a strict place.
Right.
Kids turn in their phone at the door upon arrival. They do not see it again until dismissal. They're not checking it during lunch.
That's
You are going to
fantastic.
do all of your assignments. You are going to wear the uniform, and you are not going to argue about it. And if a teacher tells you what to do, you are going to say yes, sir, and do it. Like, that strict disciplinary structure is in. And
Yeah.
everyone needs to be on board with that. You don't have to profess the whole faith to fit in here, but you can't be a rebel. That's just not going to fly. That's what it takes to make a school culture, healthy and stable. And what surprises people is it's still joyful.
Yeah.
I think there's a kind of trope from people who don't know any better that if you're strict, kids won't be happy.
No,
Those people haven't raised kids.
yeah, it's actually giving them peace.
Yes.
Children want structure. Structure brings peace. It brings safety. It brings
Yep.
familiar. You're familiar with what's going to happen, what's the expectations are, so it makes you.
And often your students who are the most rebellious are not opposed to strictness.
Mm-hmm.
They are trying to find where the lines are because they need that safety. Almost
Right.
always your most disruptive, most disrespectful authority of the students are the ones who have a rough home life, who don't have stability and structure and routine and safety at home because there's not that strictness for whatever reason, and no culpability necessarily implied there, right? And at school, they are testing the lines. And if you don't give them a very firm, structured line, and you don't give them what amounts to some tough love sometimes, they realize you're not strong enough to do it either, and they stay rebellious. And if you give them that structure, they'll grumble about it, but they turn out to love you for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say in Catholic education is the overall? I'm not talking a specific church or a specific school or diocese. What is the biggest weakness we have, and what do we need to turn around? I know it's a big question, right? I'm asking pie in the sky here, but if you had your magic wand to say, okay, I want this, I would like to see this in all Catholic schools.
I can get it down to 2 points. There are 2 things that need to happen. And really, both of them add up to the mission. You just got to kind of clarify what the mission is.
Right.
The mission for Catholic education is, 1, to help the students fall more in love with Jesus Christ by, number 2, cultivating virtue. That first part is what makes a school distinctly Catholic. Every decision you make, every book you pick, every uniform you enforce, every single decision should in some way point back to that first thing. If it's not part of bringing them to Christ, why are we doing it? And 2, the part that makes you distinctly a school, as opposed to, I don't know, a hospital or a daycare or whatever other kind of thing you are, is the cultivation of virtue. That, by the way, is what defines classical education as distinct from modern education. The John Dewey system of education that has run the American public schools, and that you and I probably got in our Catholic school if we went to Catholic school, because the schools just kind of went with the flow of the world for a while there.
And still do.
Does not fit Catholic anthropology. The Catholic view versus the modern secular view of the human person is different. The Catholic view of what sin is and what redeeming from it is different than what the public school system thinks it is, and what John Dewey's writings imply what it is. And therefore, the antidote to it, the antidote to the human problem, is different in Catholic schools than it is in secular schools. A classical Catholic school is the school that has recognized those differences and has decided to do the Catholic thing, specifically on the cultivation of virtue.
Right.
Yeah.
And having virtue, too, makes a young man or a young woman confident in who they are.
Yes.
It gives them a sense of being and a sense of purpose, like a lot like the military, a lot like basic training does. It takes somebody, and it's hardcore, but they come out and they're full of confidence. They're not broken. They're full of confidence.
What's been broken is their ego.
Exactly.
Which is an enemy of real confidence, of real virtue, right?
Right.
I mean, what boot camp does right is mortify the flesh.
Right.
To mortify the ego, so that the real person that ego wants to squelch down and crush can shine through.
Yeah.
What it does wrong for our purposes, not for its own purposes, is it doesn't cultivate an independent intellect. It trains you to obey orders, right? The
Right.
study of the liberal arts, specifically in the classical model, is you get that mortification of the will and of the flesh and the discipline so that you can think clearly, you can contemplate beauty, you can have that
Right.
philosophical intellectual life and integrate it with your prayer life.
Yeah.
So that the methods are slightly different, but they're closer than people from public school world would be comfortable admitting,
Right.
or they ought to be.
And the ultimate goal is that young man or woman becomes the man he or she was created by God to be.
Yes.
And you're just helping them, forming them, that they can find that on their own.
Correct.
Right.
I think most teachers, regardless of classical versus modern, Catholic versus secular, would agree with what you've said.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to help kids become the fullest version of themselves or their best self or something
Right.
along those lines. But I think where they would disagree is by what process you have to get there. And the analogy I think is most helpful here is a garden. It's not a coincidence we talk about cultivating virtue. You can't make virtue. It's not a factory product. There's nothing you can stamp on a kid that compels virtue, right? You cultivate it. You give it all the preconditions to come through, and often it does, and sometimes you're surprised how much it does, but you don't make the plants grow. No matter what you do to a garden, no matter how much fertilizer you add, no matter how much sunlight you guarantee it gets, no matter how much you water it,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't also weed, you will not have a garden.
Right.
You will have a bed of weeds. There is no caring for plants. There is no cultivating a garden that isn't a little bit what feels to a modern progressive person as violent. Certain things are bad and you have to rip them out by the roots. And if you don't have a garden.
Yeah.
That's the part where
That's well said. I like
progressive
that.
secularism is very uncomfortable. And that thinks, no, you can't prune anything from the kid. It's all authentic.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not true. That kid is affected by sin. He has vices. He has evil inclinations, and we have to rip them out by the roots for his own good. And we are expected, as the adults in the room, to be the ones wise enough, one, to identify which tendencies you need to excoriate, and to do so gently without destroying the whole garden, right?
Right.
If you're not prepared to do that, if you're not prepared to get your hands dirty doing that, you don't belong gardening, and you probably don't belong teaching, at least not in the Catholic view.
No, that is well said. I like that. I like that analogy. It's it really it makes you better. It brings it to light. You better understand it, because it is true. As parents of children, we don't let them do whatever they want. Because we know that some things they're going to do, they're going to get hurt, or they're going to hurt other people. We put rules in place, or we put limits to certain things they can do, and then we correct when they do something wrong.
Yeah.
It's all part of that formation process, right?
And I'm glad you went right to what parents do, because the church is incredibly clear on this one and has been throughout the centuries. The parent is the primary educator.
Right.
The teacher or the school is the secondary educator. I am a collaborator. I am an assistant
Right.
to the parent. Right? They're the team lead. I'm a specialist. I'm really good at teenagers.
Yeah.
You don't want me consulting on 7-year-olds. I don't know what to do with a 7-year-old. My wife does. She teaches the little kids, right?
Yeah.
But the parent is, I don't know, the medical analogy is like a PCP versus the team of all the subspecialists, right? I'm a specialist. I'm here to assist. But there is a person at the center who has control over the whole project and who's responsible for the whole person. And I'm here to serve them with my expertise in my field.
Right. Not only that, they made those promises to God, not to the church, at their child's baptism.
Yes.
They promised to be the initial teacher, to be the first teacher of the faith to their children. And I always tell them at the baptism, you're not promising to me. You're not promising to Father Dan. You're not promising to the church. You're promising to God.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. And even the ones who haven't, I'm always going to have non-Catholic families in my Catholic schools. I'm always going to have completely unchurched and non-baptized families,
Right.
at least a few in my school. They at least at the level of nature, even without that infusion
Right.
of grace, know there are things that are good for my kid. There are things that are bad for my kid, and I have to fight the bad ones.
Right.
That instinct is enough that we can build on it and agree with it, and you can fit in great at my school and get a lot out of it.
And by running a school like that, you're evangelizing to those men and women, to those mom and dads, and to those
Yes.
children. That's the beauty of that, surrounding them with other people who know the faith, who are living the faith, who can show them the joy of that. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, and we have families come into the church through our school.
Yeah.
And I don't think most pastors are in the habit of thinking of their Catholic schools, if they have a parish with a Catholic school, as an evangelization outreach. And I don't blame them for not. If your schools have not been radically mission oriented on both parts of that mission, cultivate love of Christ by cultivating virtue, if your
Right.
schools haven't aggressively lived up to both sides of that mission, then they haven't been good centers of evangelization. And so you're unaccustomed to thinking of them as one.
Right.
But a Catholic school that's doing that 100% all day, every day, does bring people into the faith. It does expose people who are there, not because it's Catholic, but at least because it's Christian. Or not because it's Christian, but at least because it's strict and that matters to you. Or even, I mean, post COVID and in the following years, there's an infusion of families who would never consider Catholic education strictly because some of the gloomier parts of the ideology that got pushed in schools for a while there, and
Yeah.
in some places still are, at least the teacher isn't going to indoctrinate my kid into that. Like,
Right.
the bar is so low in some places some of the time for us to outcompete
Oh my
that
gosh.
that we're
Yes.
getting people in the door.
Yeah.
If you're not converting on those opportunities, you're missing something.
Yeah, and it's we're all called to evangelize in whatever we do, and that sometimes it means standing out there and reading verses, but most 99% of the times it's how we live, and how we're taking our responsibility of our educating our children and living our life.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Good Catholic education, done thoroughly, done with excellence across all those, both of those ends of the mission,
Right.
is an incredible tool for evangelization, and has been for centuries.
Yeah.
If you're working at or running or attending a Catholic school that isn't making converts, my question is, are you doing what the church has been doing for the last 2,000 years?
Right.
Or did you chase after some modern fad of only the last century, and that's why you're lost and it's not working?
Yeah, and maybe you shouldn't call yourself Catholic anymore then, because it can be misleading.
Yes, and that's that vaccination problem we talked about earlier,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If you're
yeah.
not going to do it all out, I wish you wouldn't. I wish you wouldn't use that word. I wish no one would take that word lightly,
No.
right? The word Catholic must always be interpreted maximally, not minimally.
Hmm.
And there's a certain bad attitude to interpreting it minimally. As long as I check these boxes, as long as I obey the precepts of the church, as long as I technically don't commit heresy, whatever
Right.
the minimal thing is, well, then I'm Catholic. Okay, you've got it upside down. You've stood the thing on your head. I don't want to be the bare minimum Catholic
Right.
and then get on with the other parts of my life. I want to be maximally. I want to figure out how to bring everything into this. That's the proper sense
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. Surrender completely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how can you be more authentically Catholic tomorrow than you were today? Like, if you as a school leader don't ask that question when you get up, like, I want someone else to try that job who does, right? Like,
Yeah. It is encouraging to hear what's going on in the country. And I was talking to you before we started recording about these other classical schools schools who've converted to the classical education. And I listened to the people talk about how they're going through the roof. The faith is spreading. The church is filling up. All this is happening because of the education in the school.
yes,
So
there's a real renewal going on
yeah,
in large parts of the country that hasn't quite hit here yet. It's starting to.
we
It's
are the
starting to be
frozen
whispered.
chosen here.
Yes. The fact that St. Michael's in Brattleboro, Vermont, opened a classical high school in the last 10 years
Yeah,
is sort of like the first shoot, right? The first plant breaking through the frost in early spring, to my mind. Archdiocese of Boston just opened a classical school. They opened a Chesterton Academy of School, Our Lady of the Immaculata.
nice.
I think it's just east of Framingham, maybe.
Yeah,
There's schools starting to pop up, kind of getting closer to our region.
right.
And I'm starting to think this diocese needs a classically Catholic school. We've got 2, and arguably in a remote sense, 3 Catholic high schools here.
Right.
St. Michael's has an obvious problem. It is way too far away to serve most of our diocese, right? My commute is insane. No high schooler should have to go through that. Certainly no elementary school students should.
Right.
They're doing it all right. They're just doing it far away. St. Mary's and Pope each kind of have a problem, right? Pope is very good at being a school. And I mean that in terms of they have strict discipline, they form strict habits. I mean, the
Right.
dean of students over there, Scott O'Neill, he runs a tight ship. He's a great guy. And he's done really good work making sure there is a high level of respect. You learn to work hard, you turn in your work on time, you don't disrespect teachers. That's gone really well.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't think Pope has done, or I have questions about whether or not it's done, I haven't been there in a while, is whether or not the faith, and specifically the Eucharist, right, is at the center of everything they do. I think because they approach school in sort of that John Dewey modern model of education, where everything is siloed. This department here, that department there. This office in its lane, that office in its lane.
Right.
What is officially the theology department kind of de facto becomes the Catholic department. If you surveyed the teachers at Pope outside the theology department and asked all of them, is evangelization your job? I think the majority of them would say no. And that to me is what's missing there.
Yeah.
There is a real Catholic identity there. There is a real devotion there. But it's one slice of the school,
Right.
not the whole school. And St. Mary's has the opposite problem. They are, or at least were when last I was there, substantially more. Every single person needs to at least be not opposed to the mission and maybe bought in. When I was the academic dean, most of what I did was make sure our hiring was obsessively mission focused. Instead of hiring teachers and try to persuade them to evangelize, I hired evangelists and trained them how to teach.
Right.
Which I think is the right order of operations, right? Teaching is a job skill. You can learn it on the ground. But I can't make you grow the heart of an evangelist at your 9 to 5, especially if it's just a 9 to 5. It's never going to happen.
Or hiring people that aren't Catholic to teach in a Catholic school. I never understood that
It makes
philosophy.
sense if you start with the compartmentalization of things.
Right.
What does it matter if the science teacher is Catholic? Science isn't a Catholic subject. It's a,
Yeah.
oh, well, hold on. And
Yeah.
you and I see the problem right away,
Yeah.
right? St. Mary's doesn't have that problem. They're more in on the faith. The prayer life is robust. They go to Mass every week. But they haven't figured out the institutional side of things. I mean, to be a school, your revenues have to match your expenses. You've got to be able to keep the lights on. Enrollment has to be at a stable place. And those operational things are related to how strict is your discipline, how well defined is your culture. And they haven't locked that piece in. And a lot of my attempts to do that is where I got really frustrated.
Right.
They're very good at cultivating supernatural virtue. They're not necessarily, or when I was there, I was frustrated in my attempts to make them also good at cultivating natural virtue.
Yeah.
The discipline isn't there. And Pope's got the inverse. They're good at cultivating natural virtue. It's not clear that they're across the board cultivating faith, hope, and charity.
Right.
That's not necessarily there. What needs to happen is there needs to be a school that's doing both. We've got a school that's all in on bringing the kids closer to Christ
Mm-hmm.
and real fuzzy on cultivating virtue, and a school that's really serious about cultivating virtue in an old school preparatory kind of way and is fuzzy on Christ.
Yeah.
Those are two halves of good schools. I want to see one that does both of those all out.
I agree with you. I'm not, I know what I know only by listening to you and listening to Catholic radio because I'm not an expert in any of this by any means, but I like your dedication. I like your passion about this. I think it's important to have teachers and have people that are in the system teaching our children they're passionate about their faith, that they live their faith 24/7.
Yes.
It can't just be something, well, I go to church on Sunday. Well, I grew up like that. I wasn't Catholic.
Oh, it's got to be alive.
I was only a card carrying Catholic, and you have to, I mentioned the word surrender earlier, but you got to surrender. It's got to be everything. It's got to be the center of your life,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, how am I going to light them on fire if I'm not already blazing with it?
Right, right. And you want to share that joy anyway. I mean, that's the greatest thing we can share with them is that, they were made by God and for a purpose, for greatness,
Yes.
God never made anybody just to make them. He
Yeah.
made them for greatness.
No minimalism.
Yeah.
No good
exactly.
enough. No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I want you all the way.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, what's the point? Like,
Right.
otherwise, I'm a public school teacher who took a pay cut to work in the Catholic schools, and for what?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah, and we see it in our public school systems with the kids with their depression and their anxiety, and that's real. That's real. At first I didn't think it was real, but I've been around enough kids and I've heard their stories, and it breaks your heart.
They're really hurting.
I mean, they're mentally not doing well.
Yeah.
They're in a place of
awful.
just darkness, and it's sad to see that because they have youth, they have love, they have joy, they have all this growing to do.
This should be like one of the most fun times of their lives.
Yeah.
And they're hurting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no good.
No.
Got to build them up. Got to set them on fire.
Well, this has been fantastic, Luke. Thank you so much for coming in here. It's you're always a good friend. You always attend all my events. I can always count on Luke. He's always that guy. He's always that guy that shows up. Let's end with a quick prayer. In the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Loving Lord, we thank you for another day in this earth, another day to grow close to you, another day to love you and love the people you put in our path. Please watch over all those teachers who are teaching in Catholic schools, that they may have a spirit-filled life, that they may be close to you and your Sacred Heart, and that they may receive the Eucharist as many times as possible, that their love for you is reflected onto their children that they are caring for and they are teaching. Watch over them all, Father, protect them all, and lift them up to you. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. God bless everyone.
The greatest thing I can be when I grow up is a saint.